What's going on, everyone? Welcome to a Monday edition of Back Your Play with Q. As always, I'm your host, Rich Quinones. We're powered by our good friends over at Play It Again Sports. Fresh roasted coffee, 20% off your first purchase. Use promo code BYP20. Our good friend, our NFL insider host of Lloyd Vance's Insider Football, Lloyd Vance, kind enough to join us and give him a follow at Lloyd Vance. The NFL draft is in the books. And what did we learn over the weekend? We learned that 32 teams are racist. There's collusion in the NFL. There's prank calls going on during war room meetings and potentially players getting drafted. There are players that just slipped, slide, and slipped again all the way to the fifth round. There is teams sticking it to other teams. I mean, back and forth. Mel Kiper's meltdown. I don't even know. You can't even keep a straight face at this moment, my friend, on this Monday edition of BYP. First of all, what a debacle and a disgrace the coverage was with some of these media members and the national media and the national sentiment who tried to cram down our throat. Shedeur Sanders, the top pick, top five, top 10. The friggin' kid falls to friggin' round five and he goes to Cleveland. And we talked about it on Thursday. We talked about it on Friday. We talked a little bit about it over the weekend, you and I texting back and forth. I mean, listen, where do we start with this one? So Shedeur Sanders not only slips past the first two rounds, he goes all the way to the fifth. As, by the way, Delaney Walker predicted back in January, so good job by him. The Browns took him with the 144th pick, where quarterbacks go to die. First off, do you believe there was any type of collusion? And do you believe that 32, or in this case, 31 teams decided we're all going to be in cahoots, we're all going to conspire and not draft this kid?
Wouldn't say collusion. Q, I just think teams look at their boards, their needs, and then they also look the value of the player. And I think when talking about Shedeur Sanders, it was overblown. A lot of people, whether it's Mel Kiper, whomever, they moved him to that number two spot, particularly in the quarterbacks, et cetera. We had always talked that this quarterback group was not a great one,
Nope.
and teams' needs were in the trenches. So ton of defensive linemen taken, ton of offensive linemen taken, not a lot of quarterbacks. And yeah, I think overall there may be some talent evaluators on teams that didn't like him, and he has a glide about him. And like anybody, whether it's Antonio Brown or even if you're not worth the squeeze, if you're going to be a problem, if you're going to come in there and try to be a social media star, et cetera, and take away from the team aspects, they don't want you around. And the question a couple guys I talked to were saying was, is he going to be come in there ready to work, be a developmental quarterback, you know, be a backup
Yeah.
quarterback and understand his role? And Dion was talking tough. Deion Sanders' father, and trying to like, oh, we're like Eli Manning. We're only going to go to certain places, and quite frankly, he didn't do well in a couple of his team meetings. Underprepared. His interviews at the combine may have not been the best, and they all talk to each other. So in the end, he gets his opportunity. 144, as you said, fifth round, may not have been what he wanted, but he's going to get his chance. And Shedeur Sanders better be coming in ready to work.
Well, listen, the Giants, the Saints, the Steelers were all teams in need of a quarterback. They were all, quote, linked to Sanders in the first round, right? Giants trade back in the first round. They grabbed Jackson Dart. The Saints grabbed Tyler Show in the second, and the Steelers chose Will Howard in the sixth because they're playing that Aaron Rodgers waiting game. The Browns also passed on Shedeur before finally grabbing him with the number 144 pick. And I don't believe there's collusion at all. I don't believe this has anything to do with, race, black, white, yellow, green, and different. I don't think the kid is as good as he believes his press clippings are. And I also think Deion Sanders hurt his stances. I think Deion Sanders, by having and making some of the comments, I should say by making, not having, but making and stating and backing some of the comments that we've heard. I mean, it came back to bite him in the ass. Listen, he got embarrassed by BYU. He didn't play in the Senior Bowl, the Shrine Bowl. He didn't throw at the combine. He basically declared, him and Deion declared, we're not going to go to certain teams. And again, when people are sitting there saying, well, look at Johnny Manziel and look at Baker Mayfield. Well, they're both on the Heisman. So already, squash that, right? I mean, Baker Mayfield's carved out a nice second career. Johnny Manziel didn't work out, it flamed out. I get it. They're braggadocious. They got the swag, all this stuff. But when you're sitting there saying we're not going to go to certain teams, that's the problem. And, this report that comes out, I believe it was today or even yesterday over the weekend. CBS Sports' Jonathan Jones said that, because of this free fall, apparently, that Shedeur Sanders was deliberately tanking, doing poorly in his pre-draft interviews at the combine to avoid getting picked by certain teams. I mean, think about that. If there's any type of legitimacy and validity to that, you're going in there tanking, and then basically you just screwed yourself. You just screwed yourself. If you're tanking because you don't want to get drafted by certain teams, and then, oh, by the way, you go where quarterbacks go to die, Cleveland. I believe Cleveland, you saw their reaction. Part of me thinks Cleveland drafted Sanders just to spite him because Dion basically said, we're not going to Cleveland. I mean, so think about all that stuff. Everyone will look at, the accolades and the stats and what he was able to do at Jackson State and then Colorado. And he's, Kuiper having a friggin' meltdown. What an ass Mel Kiper is. Get him off the friggin' TV, sitting there saying that no one knows what they've been talking about over 50 years in the NFL draft. You know how many misses you've had, Mel Kiper? It was embarrassing. I hope the check's cleared. It was embarrassing. He was trying to will the NFL to draft this kid. Is it just possible? Maybe he's not as good as people think he is. Is it possible that 31 teams and really 32 believed you're not worthy of a first round draft pick? You're not worthy of a second. You're not worthy of a third. You're not worthy of a fourth. This is where we believe you are at. And then, as you mentioned, everything else. Everything else, the attitude, the demeanor, not being prepared, dismissing other teams, tanking interviews. If that's the case, then guess what? You reap what you sow. I mean, at the end of the day, and that's it. Play the victim, play the martyr all you want, but the bottom line is you made your bed, now friggin' lie in it, and that bed resides in Cleveland. Go have fun.
Yeah, and the drama, it's all the drama. And it's crazy. We're talking about the fifth round pick, and there's so many great other stories. Cam
Agree.
Ward, and we'll get to all that. But the thing is, in the end, this is a job interview process, and agents. And a big thing, Q, is nobody's saying about he doesn't have an agent,
That's right.
so
To make
an
those calls.
agent can direct these guys, can help them. They look. They work with these front offices and they know what these teams want. And I've talked to the prospects before the draft. They said, look, we went away right after school ended, after the bowl game, and we're coached on how to interview,
Right.
on how to do the techniques for the combine, et cetera. And he did not embrace this. And I think in the end, the NFL, the owners control everything. And
Of course
the
they do.
owners and it's their league. You know what I mean? So, he's going to get his chance and he may not like where he ended up, et cetera. But it's a tough spot because he's going to Cleveland. As you said, they draft Dylan Gabriel in the second round. He's already going to be there in I think the third round. And then the quarterback room's crowded. There's five quarterbacks in that room: Deshaun Watson, Joe Flacco, Kenny Pickett, Gabriel, and Shedeur. So it's going to be interesting to see how this all plays out. But this whole everyone's against him, et cetera. Look, you got your chance.
It's
There's been other guys
ridiculous.
that have that have plummeted. Is he going to embrace this challenge, or is he going to go in there sulking and be a problem? You talk about Johnny Manziel. He didn't embrace. He. I just watched his documentary. He
Yeah.
said, "Look, I was not prepared to be a pro. I went in there
Yep.
and I was fooling myself." Well, if you do that, you're going to be out of the league very quickly. So it's going to be fun to watch this as we get into the preseason training camp process.
And by the way, I don't want to hear any more of this collusion Kaepernick kind of stuff. I don't want to hear it's a bad look for the NFL. Every owner and GM, they have the right to choose who they want to friggin' draft. Period. And I'm telling you, I believe part of it was to stick it to Dion to draft this kid Cleveland. Here's another far stretch, reaching comment. I mean, who's to say he's even going to make the roster? I mean,
He,
seriously.
right, with five quarterbacks in that room, it's going to be a challenge, And they traded for Kenny Pickett. Joe Flacco led them to the playoffs a couple of years ago. So it, he better hit the ground running,
He he
and
he overplayed and misplayed and mismanaged his hand big time. Pure. You have to put the effort in. You cannot be entitled. You have to work for every spot because I don't care if there's a veteran 38-year-old in Flacco or Pickett or who these guys, they they're not going to just sit there and hand it over. They're not. And now you come in already with this nonsense, already with this arrogance, already with this swag, already with these comments that are basically going to stick with you for a while. You know, your father's comments, Dion's comments, you're going to come in with this chip on your shoulder and your attitude. Hey, all well and good. But if you don't perform well, I mean, I'm telling you right now, it would be it would be a 30 for 30 in the making. If this kid gets cut, I mean, teams, fans hate when people in the media, when we sit here and say, sometimes a team doesn't want the headache. And I believe for 31 other teams, they just did not think this kid was first, second, third round talent, and they don't want to deal with the headache. There's thoughts already that Deion Sanders wants to sit in on offensive meetings. Like, are you kidding me? Then I said, then in light of the Jones comments, Jones report, Jonathan Jones, that he was tanking, you know, they were asking Dable about, you know, was he ill prepared during these middle meetings? Dable's not going to throw the kid under the bus. But the bottom line is, you don't think for one moment when you're sitting there interviewing or having a pre-draft interviews with some of these teams that other GMs who are buddy buddy are not going to pick up the phone and say, "Hey, man, you know," and that's not colluding. That's just me saying, "Hey, it's a red flag, man. I don't want any parts of this kid." I mean, we've seen it. We've seen it. So again, here's your friggin' bed, Shedeur. Now you got to lie. You got to lie in it. Now, if you think you're as good as you say you are, then you got to go beat out those other players and have an opportunity to get some reps and play in Cleveland. Other than that,
Right. Nothing's going to be handed to him. You know, they retired his number at Colorado. I was like, come on, what are you doing here? It's just putting a bullseye on the kid's back, you know, and you may say it's his father or whatever, but it's a tough situation now that he's going into, and he better hit the ground running. As I said, that room is very full. You know, would he be willing to go on a practice squad? You know, the reps are going to be interesting to see how Stefanski kind of, you know, who's going to get reps here and there, and can he beat him out? You know, I look at think about Dallas when Dak Prescott went there as fourth rounder. Yeah, Tony Romo was still there. He beat him out. You know, he embraced the opportunity. He was thought to be a first round talent at one point at Mississippi State coming out of there. You know, the
yeah,
team was undefeated for a large part of the season. And he said, you know what, I'm gonna put my head down, going to work. And he ended up getting
right.
a job over Romo. So we'll see what Sanders can do, but he's got to embrace his challenge. And it's the NFL. You know, you got to prove it in the National Football League because let's face it, the Big 12 and college football is kind of easy. Yes, they made a big jump at Colorado, going from being a bad team to winning and getting to bowl games, but uh, he better be prepared.
Listen, he's got flaws in his game. The attitude didn't help. They misplayed, they mismanaged. He had all the issues during the pre-draft process, which word gets around like wildfire. It spreads in the NFL. You talk about the reputation. The NFL is basically saying, we own the league. We don't like how you handle the entire draft process. He basically sandbagged his own uh, um, uh, draft process. I mean, that's just the bottom line. And there's also a sentiment too. You would almost think maybe it's beneficial for him to actually, you know, go back. I mean, think about it prior to like go back to college before getting drafted because you're probably going to make more money in NIL than you would at this stage.
He's a fifth rounder too. Dollars wise, he probably could. And
Yeah.
yeah, as you said, he made his bed. He's got his landing spot like 256 other guys, and you know you got to embrace challenge. Come in there because I used to always go to that first mini camp after the draft and just watch some of these guys come in
Sure.
because the veterans, you know, the veterans are going to make them earn it. You talk to the guys in the locker room or the side, you know, they're going to say, "All right, well, let's see what this bonus baby can do." You know, it did the team reach for him? You know, what's he really like in the locker room?
And the bizarre comes out with Jeff Ulbricht's son. I mean,
Yeah.
it, listen, that's a shitty thing to do. Like honestly, it really is. Like you know how you obtain that phone number and then prank call the kid. I know the NFL is looking into the situation. It puts his father in a bad spot too, as the defensive coordinator with the Atlanta Falcons. Oh, by the way, where Deion was drafted. But then I'm wondering, you know, back in the day, Deion Sanders. But I'm also wondering, you know, can the NFL step in and do anything about this. I mean, it wasn't Ulbrich himself that did it, but it's just, you know, it's not funny. It's not cool. I know people think it's cool, but it's not. It's just, you don't do that kind of nonsense.
Sure, I got a college age kid. And this is the type of thing they think it's funny and all this. It's not. And I guess it's going to have to come down to Ulbrich talking to his son and like, look, man, what the bleep are you doing? You know what I mean? And unfortunately, yeah, now the bullseye is on his father. He came from the Jets, coming to the Falcons. Good story, trying to fix that defense from last year that really didn't have a lot of teeth. But now he's going to probably have to deal with his father, and then the team will talk to him about it. But in terms of NFL discipline, I just don't know what is going to happen. I heard he already called Shedeur Sanders and apologized, and the kid was like, "Okay, I messed up," but
Yeah.
seriously, I mean, why do you need to do that?
It's a
Ruin
punk move.
somebody's
Yeah.
special moment. It
Yeah.
totally is.
Yeah. It's a punk move. And somewhere Mel Kiper still has Shedeur Sanders, as his, best available player. So, all right. So, with all that, I know it's way too early. But a lot of people do like what Cleveland did with the draft. A lot of people like what the Giants did with the draft. I know, as we say, April, what are you talking about the grades? But, what team or team stood out and you kind of like the direction in which they went when it came to the draft?
Yeah, 2 to 3 years, we always say that. But I really like, the Falcons. They had a small class. There was only 5 players or so,
Yeah.
but they went about fixing that defense. Jelani Walker is an edge that's going to bring in there, bring some heat in terms of that defensive line. And they traded back and got James Pearson
Yep.
coming
Tennessee.
out of Tennessee, another guy. They got the safety, Xavier Watts out of Notre Dame. So, Atlanta's trying to fix that defense. Their offense proved it could put some points up. So I like that. The Ravens. I know every year you're like, oh, you like what the Ravens do, but the Ravens do. I like what in terms of what Ozzie Newsome, who's GM and emeritus, and his group's doing there, and they get Starks, the safety. I really like. They're going to slide him in next to Hamilton. Mike Green had some character issues coming out of
Yeah.
Marshall, but
Yep.
they take a chance on him. They have the infrastructure to kind of say, okay, we'll take care of him, and it's going to help the D line in terms of they led the NFL with 63 sacks last year, and it'll definitely improve that. So, um, good picks there, and then just all along the board, man.
What
With
I
the
I know when we were doing our overview and preview, we talked a lot about the Arizona Cardinals. We know what they can do offensively, but I thought they had to go in and really attack the defensive side of the ball. They went defensive tackle with Nolan out of Mississippi. They went with Johnson, the cornerback out of Michigan, and then they went with Birch, the edge out of Oregon. They added a linebacker in the fourth round. I think they added a safety in the seventh round. They focused on defense the first 2 days of the draft. And a lot of people think Nolan and Johnson are going to be stars if they can stay healthy. Kind of like what Atlanta did. They went defense. They had to shore a couple things up. You just mentioned Baltimore, but I do like what Arizona did. And I actually thought the Buffalo Bills had a pretty solid draft, and Carolina too. I feel as though Carolina, they're trying to build something. They got a playmaker for a young quarterback. Then all of a sudden, in round number two and round number three, 51-77 respectively, they went defense. So how about Arizona, Carolina, some of those teams?
Yeah, they're two good young teams that are trying to improve. You know what I mean? They got new coaches pretty much in there, and the regime's kind of coming together. And I thought they did a nice job in terms of hitting needs, and that's what you want to do. You want to get the guys that can come in, help fill a hole, maybe help day one or special teams, or if they're round one, round two. And help you there. So I did like what Carolina did in terms of bringing in the running back and some of that offensive talent. So Carolina, they're definitely on the move. It's funny because we were talking about Bryce Young, last year. What's going on with him? Wrong pick. Well, he's going to be in year two, and now he has these weapons, Q, that they kind of brought around him. So hopefully they can fix that defense. I want to also throw in. I thought that Kansas City did a nice job. Picking late in the draft. They got Simmons, an offensive tackle. They got an edge to help out Chris Jones there, and Norman Lott coming out of Tennessee, and another edge later on. And then they got a kick return type in Jalen Royals, who's going to help out on special teams. So, these teams definitely they trust their board, and then that's the thing. You don't want to reach. You want to trust your board and come out of there with at least, 7, 8 players that can help your roster.
Yeah, and by the way, my comment about the Browns, obviously, if you've listened to me crush them, then you know it was certainly a tongue-in-cheek comment about the Browns. I mean, look, you had a bunch of teams that I think you can sit there and say they did well, A, B, but again, I mean, I have no idea what are the Browns doing. Like people are killing the Giants because they signed Wilson and Winston, and then they trade back to draft a quarterback. But look at the Browns. You mentioned it, right? I mean, think about this. You go with a tackle, okay, and then you turn around. You start with Thursday, but then you talk about that the quarterbacking room. Maybe I give them an eye for incomplete. I don't know. I think it's a recipe for disaster with the quarterback room, but be that as it may. So I'll ask you, did you give a failing grade? Did anyone get a C? Did they get a D?
Yeah, there were a couple teams that point out, and I always call it head scratchers. And one of those, you talk about Cleveland with picking Dylan Gabriel and then getting back to get Shedeur. What are you doing? They had a lot more team needs. That was definitely a head scratcher. Miami, I did like Kenneth Grant
Right.
in the first round of pick 13, but after that, I just saw a lot of players like, are these guys going to be able to contribute right away for the Dolphins? And you're starting to wonder, okay, what is the Dolphins' plan here, and how patient is Stephen Ross, their owner, going to be? And then I'll throw in the Saints queue. Everybody was picking Shador there. I'd obviously, okay, let down, but Kelvin Banks, solid offensive lineman at number 9. But then after that, in the second round, you got this Tyler Show coming out of Louisville, one of the quarterbacks, and you're like, I just don't know if he's going to help the team right away. Picking him, um, and then they had a running back from Kansas. Is he ready to help the team? So I definitely think the Saints they have some work to do going into next season. And we talked about that division, how it's kind of downtrodden. And Kellen Moore's bringing a new regime, but they have a lot of work to do. And I'm not sure how much the draft helped them.
Listen, say what you want. Howie does what Howie does, right? Howie Roseman, GM of the Philadelphia Eagles. You turn around, you get Campbell. They think he's a steal. You get a safety, then you get a defensive tackle in round number 4. They add a bunch of pieces. I mean, they wanted to trade up for Campbell as early as number 22. They trade up just one pick to get him at 31. Howie Roseman, the Eagles brass believe he's a top 10 talent. And I know there are some medical questions about him, remains to be seen. But listen, they know defense, 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 defense wins championships. They added a safety after trading C.J. Gardner-Johnson to the Texans. Ty Robinson, you talk about Williams, who left the Eagles, Jordan Davis, currently set to be a free agent after 2025. We'll see if they pick up his fifth year option, pardon me, for 2026. I think that's a May 2nd deadline. So they wanted to add more defensive tackle help. They did that. Now you got a rotation, him, Carter, Davis, Ojomo. So listen, I mean, the Eagles do what the Eagles do.
Yeah, I'm based in the Philadelphia area, so I heard from a lot of Eagles fans, friends, and family that they were happy about drafting. And when I started to delve into the queue, they did a nice job. Howie Roseman, I know for years you and I have talked, and I killed him on some of his picks, like
Can't
Rieger over
anymore.
Jefferson. But now he has a formula, and he's sticking with mostly SEC players. He's hitting these big schools, getting these dominant linemen, and then piecing it all together. So you talk about John Campbell, a kid coming in from Jersey, knows the Eagles, and he's excited. Everybody at Alabama raves about this young man. So he may play inside, he may play outside. More than likely, he's going to be next to Zach Blunt in their formation defensively. I think he's going to help out. You talk about the Texas safety. I think he's a nice player. The high motor, Ty Robinson, coming out of Nebraska, he's going to help supplant Milton Williams, who left. And then they get the hometown kid recorded quarterback position. So the Eagles did a lot of nice things. It's going to be interesting, Q. 10 picks, though. So how's it all going to work in camp? There's only 90 bodies going to camp, and then they got to obviously cut down.
Lastly, you saw what the Pittsburgh Steelers did and what they didn't do, right? By passing on Sanders. And again, um, I'm just I'm wondering now if if you look at what Tomlin and Pittsburgh is doing. I know a couple of Steelers fans, and they were like absolutely beside themselves. They thought it was a guarantee that okay, here you go, right? You're going to um, get a quarterback. So they go tackle, they go running back, edge, tackle, and then they got a quarterback in round number 6, the kid Will Howard out of Ohio State. Does that give you more confidence, or does it make you believe more in the fact that they're working something out with Aaron Rodgers?
Yeah, and you talking about Will Howard. He's a kid they drafted. He's actually, I saw him play in high school, so he's a good, solid kid, but they need a quarterback. You know what I mean? You got Howard, you got Mason Rudolph, and not much else there. So, yeah, I all along I thought they were not going to wait on Aaron Rodgers. So it seems to me that they said, okay, we're going to see what Rodgers does, give him the first opportunity if he wants to play at 41 in Pittsburgh. So it seems like it's Pittsburgh or bust in terms of where he's going to land this season, but going to be interesting to watch.
By the way, can you give a little, some flowers to the Giants here? Carter, Dart, Alexander, and then my guy Scattaboo. Scattaboo in the fourth round, like the song, right? Bohemian Rhapsody, Scattaboo, sent a bolt to
Yeah,
lightning. Very, very
and
frightening.
you and I talked after day one. I thought day one they thought their picks were great on the first day, Q, and
Yeah.
they continue, and they better, because day ball, Shane, it's desperation time for them. So it's going to be fun. And Scatterboo, that's a fun pick. I want to see how he's going to do. Had a very good career at Arizona State. We talked about their need of having another running back in there, and he's going to be able to help Tracy out there.
Do you think signing Wilson and then Winston and then obviously trading back and drafting Dart, I believe they believe they have their potential franchise quarterback. How do you work in the reps? Like I can't I don't foresee. I think Wilson will start. I don't even know if Winston's going to be on the roster.
Mhm. And as Cam started, Wilson will get the first reps, and then as you're saying, Jackson Dart will get every opportunity not only make this squad but also be the primary backup. So it is going to be tough on Winston. And the thing about Winston and Wilson, they're 1 year contracts, and in the NFL, that's pretty much disposable. That means they probably didn't get a lot of guaranteed money, don't have a lot invested in them, and they can be cut very easily. So going to be a fun room, and the reps will come in terms of veteran teams will have their veteran quarterback first, but these teams like the Browns, it's going to be open competition, and you got to excel on the limited amount of reps that you're going to get.
Um, all right. Lastly, 49ers, Brock Purdy. I mean, where are we at right now with the 49ers and this potential contract extension, which, by the way, people think it's going to be about 350 million dollars.
Yeah, Jed York, the owner, and John Lynch are working on this, and they're saying by all indications, by training camp time, it's going to be a done deal. I think Purdy's going to get upwards of $52 million a year. They cut a lot of guys, moved a lot of money around. There weren't a lot of free agents that they brought in. They let a lot of guys go, like Javon Hargrave, and I think Purdy's going to get his pay, and you're not going to see a holdout situation.
All right, he of course is Lloyd Vance, kind enough to join us, host of Lloyd Vance's Insider Football. There is no collusion when Lloyd Vance is kind enough to join us. Give him a follow on social media at Lloyd Vance. Myself at Rich Q on Q. Another edition of BYP. We'll do it again later on the week. We got to kind of start to look ahead and maybe kind of handicap some of these divisions. And, we can talk about the draft a little more, but you start to say, okay, who do you think is going to be some of these favorites coming out of the divisions? Then obviously you got the OTAs, then we got training camp, then we got preseason, and boom, we're going to blink. It's going to be September, and we'll roll along to another NFL season. And as I mentioned, somewhere Mel Kiper still has best available player on his board, Shedeur Sanders. Uh, we are
Watch
powered
my
by.
guy Charles Davis and them on NFL Network instead, man.
Yeah, I mean that's yeah, because they're actually of sound mind. It was a meltdown. I mean, his hair was disheveled, out of place. It was a meltdown. That's all it was. I mean, him and Reese Davis going back and forth. You're going to call into question 50 years of NFL decision makers. You're saying the NFL doesn't know how to view or how to judge or how to analyze quarterbacks over the last 50 years. Really? That's where we're going, Mel Kiper.
Yeah, it was an interesting take. I was just like surprised. He was standing on a hill, Q, and as the draft just kept going along, you
It was,
know,
yes, it was
it
getting
was just
worse.
like it was a mess. It was
Yeah,
total
yeah,
drama.
yeah. That's the hill he chose to die on, and you have to at least give him some credit and respect for that. But hey, anyway, again, Lloyd Vance kind enough to join us this edition of BYP. Again, we'll start to look at some futures and some updated odds for some of these divisional winners, and we'll forecast going in to the season as well. We'll do that later on in the week. But appreciate everyone keeping us locked in, and always appreciate a couple moments, my friend. Thank you.
You thanks for having me on.